Hi everyone, it's John. It's Tuesday, so I've got another book review to give to you guys. A couple of months ago, I reviewed another book, which would have been my second by this author, and the author is Evelyn Waugh. This is book number 3 by Evelyn Waugh that I've read, that I can remember, and this is A Handful of Dust. Nice little penguin there. A Handful of Dust by Evelyn Waugh. Ever since reading Brideshead Revisited, which was the first novel by Waugh that I read and reviewed on this channel, and being completely enchanted by it, very much what I would consider a 5-star book, and a book that I will return to throughout my life. I've always wanted to eventually make time for reading more of him. Only a few months ago did I review Scoop, which I'd also talked to you about, which was a satire about Fleet Street journalism during the 20s and 30s. A Handful of Dust is a very different kind of novel. It again takes a turn for the much more serious and tragic, but still has its very wry touch of humor as well. As someone said in a Goodreads review, while the tragic element dominates, there's a lot more playfulness and humor in here than the title might lead you to believe. Waugh's characters invariably seem to have evocative or suggestive names, and Brenda and Tony Last, L-A-S-T, are no different here. They are very comfortably ensconced in Tony's ancestral home, which is called Heaton Abbey, or Hetton Abbey, which feels like a cloister to Brenda. She feels very uncomfortable there. She doesn't really like the architecture of the place or the way it feels. But repairing it and keeping it up keeps Tony happy and preoccupied. So they stay there. Thomas Beaver is this young aristocratic Manc who's sort of got really lower middle class origins but has a lot of social pretensions. He meets the Lasts one day, and despite Brenda and Tony's rather cool, distant reception of him, he seems to enjoy spending time around them. He becomes especially close to Brenda, who almost looks on him like he's someone to take care of in sort of a motherly way. But after a while, their relationship grows beyond a doting phase, and Brenda gets an apartment in London so she can get away from Tony and more close to Thomas. And of course, it turns into an affair. Meanwhile, while all Tony's friends know exactly what's going on, he's completely oblivious to what's going on. He has no idea that she's shacking up with another guy, and everyone else in the novel knows. It's almost painful to read for that reason. Brenda seems not to care that Thomas's income can't support her lifestyle, or that Thomas has never consistently worked in his entire life. She plans to support both of them on alimony that she's going to get from Tony, which ultimately means forcing him to sell Heaton Abbey just so he can support his cheating wife and her new boyfriend. So she's very presumptuous and quite greedy in how she's going to be making a living from now on. While Brenda inflicts her share of pain to Tony, Thomas inadvertently returns the favor, inadvertently though it might be, thinking of his relationship with Brenda as really nothing more than a romantic dalliance. Despite the fact that she has actually genuinely started to develop feelings for Thomas and even start to fall in love with him. Tony ends up needing to leave Heaton Abbey for a while just to get away, to clear his mind of everything that's going on. He ends up being the subject of still another adventure that he didn't expect to go on. that he probably never could have forecasted for himself. So he decides to go on a cruise around the South Pacific, and he runs into this archaeologist. He almost dies, almost survives by accident, is rescued by an illiterate English expat whose idea of fun is to have Tony read Charles Dickens to him all day, every day, which I would call true torture, as the saying, but, the best laid plans. As the reviews on Goodreads will broadly attest, it's noted that Americans rarely understand or appreciate the British sense of humor. I can kind of agree with this because when I tried to read Lord Jim several years ago, also, which I think I reviewed on this channel, it was a long time ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't understand what was funny about Lord Jim at all. Even though it's supposed to be one of the great 20th century British comic campus novels. I didn't see the humor in it. Maybe I just need to go back and reread it now that I'm, 6 or 7 years older. But I can certainly understand why this does not come across as funny to people. It actually has a death in it. Not of a major character, but the death of a child, actually. And it's a pretty central event in the book. And obviously there's sort of treachery and dishonesty in it. But I think one of the interesting things about British humor is that they can not only see the humor in that or the wryness in it, but maybe see through it. And I think I might have discovered what rings so true about the characters of Tony and Brenda Last. I would say that we really fail to understand entire British sensibilities. Americans want their tragedy full of wickedness. They want black and white characters. They want neat edges. They want the cleanliness of murder and gore or rape, in reaction to which we can quickly point our fingers and assign blame and say, you're the good one, you're the bad one, and that's that. Needless to say, A Handful of Dust is much more about the small but very crippling ways in which human beings can be cruel to one another. Which really, and what really hurts here are the ways that people can live in such physical closeness, live in the same city, the same hamlet, the same house, even, in the case of Tony and Brenda, and still express inhumane disregard for each other's feelings on just an incredible level. And like I said, with that kind of sentiment at hand, it's hard to appreciate humor in a book like this that has so much cruelty in it. But maybe an example will help. One of the most memorable characters from the book is a minor character. He's an old vicar who lives on the property of Hayton Abbey and has been there since really time immemorial, since the British used to rule India under the Raj. And he's since entered his dotage, I guess we can say, and he's begun to repeat sermons. He doesn't really know he's repeating them, but he's a little bit, half not there. And sometimes he repeats sermons that have absolutely no relevance to the event that they're being sermonized at. And he makes reference to life in India all the time as if he's still living there. At one point in the novel, everyone is gathered, and you just have to picture this in your head. It's hilarious. It was hilarious to read. It made me laugh out loud. At one point in the novel, everyone is gathered in the chapel, bundled up warmly on Christmas morning, sitting around the fire in the small little chapel. And the vicar says the following: how difficult it is for us to realize that this is indeed Christmas Instead of the glowing log fire and windows tight shuttered against the drifting snow, we have only the harsh glare of an alien sun. Instead of the happy circle of loved ones, of home and family, we have the uncomprehending stares of the subjugated, though no doubt grateful heathen. Instead of the placid ox and ass of Bethlehem, we have for companions the ravening tiger and the exotic camel, the furtive jackal and the ponderous elephant. So, I mean, he still thinks he's in India. That's the joke. So even the humor here is sort of very sort of subtle and British, and it's still sort of tinged by memory and loss. I mean, the source of the laugh here is his own loss of memory, which is a bit poignant if you really think about it. So, as you can tell, I've maybe been reading more than my fair share of Waugh lately, at least over the past few years. And I've also been exposed to some of the writing of Somerset Maugham, actually. Another really great writer who I'd read one book of a long time ago and am going to be definitely much more interested in reading more of very soon. And in fact, very soon I'll be posting a review of Cakes and Ale for one of my weekly Tuesday reviews. While they're still read to an extent, Maugh and Waugh, unintentionally rhyming authors there, they both belong to a really fast disappearing group of writers whose deftness and intelligence, they're both really smart writers, I think. Then they're both able to sort of explore human frailty in really inventive and deep, interesting ways. So for that reason, I'm interested in reading in both of them. Actually, I think I would like to maybe dig into Of Human Bondage sometime this year. It's a bit of a big book, but it's considered Maugham's masterpiece that he wrote actually fairly early in life, in his mid-30s, but is one that I haven't read yet. So if I get to it, I will certainly report back, as I always do. If you've read Evelyn Waugh's A Handful of Dust, let me know what you think. Leave me a comment below, and I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.